Welcome to Understand the Math. In the video description, you'll find a link to guided notes that can be downloaded and filled in as you follow along with the video. In this video, I'm going to discuss the special angles and coordinate points that are used extensively in trigonometry and highlight the angles and coordinate points on the unit circle that need to be memorized. We'll begin by quickly reviewing the quadrants and quadrant points on the unit circle. Our quadrant points are written in purple. Our first quadrant is in the upper right. Our second quadrant is in the upper left. Our third quadrant is in the lower left. And our fourth quadrant is in the lower right part of the circle. In the first quadrant, our x and y values are both positive. In the second quadrant, our x value is negative, our y value is positive. In the third quadrant, both values are negative. And in the fourth quadrant, the x value is positive and the y value is negative. Let's now look at some special angles and their coordinate points. These points appear frequently in mathematics and in real-world contexts. The special angles we're going to look at are 30 degrees, or pi over 6, 45 degrees, or pi over 4, and 60 degrees, or pi over 3. We can note these in our first quadrant on our unit circle. This first angle is 30 degrees, or pi over 6. The next angle is 45 degrees, or pi over 4. And the last angle is 60 degrees, or pi over 3. We now need to determine the xy coordinates for these special angles. We'll begin with an angle of 30 degrees. We want to find the values for x and y for an angle of 30 degrees. We need to find the value for the right side of the triangle. That will be our y value. And then we need to find the value for the bottom of the triangle, and that's our x value. We can find the value for y if we place two of these triangles together. We notice that the top angle is 60 degrees. Which means that the bottom of the triangle is equal to 1, and each side is 1/2. The reason for this is that the sides opposite equal angles have to be equal. Let's put those values now on our triangle. So the side opposite 30 degrees is 1/2. The side opposite 60 degrees is x, which we don't yet know. We can use the Pythagorean theorem that says x squared plus y squared is equal to 1. We're going to find x, so that's just x squared. We're going to plug in 1/2 for y squared, and that's equal to 1. So x squared is going to be 1 minus 1/4. So x squared is 3/4, and x is the square root of 3 divided by 2. Let's go ahead and let's put that up in our picture. So x is the square root of 3 divided by 2. We can now write the value for our coordinate point when theta is equal to 30 degrees. So up in our top picture, we have xy is equal to root 3 over 2, comma 1/2. I know a lot of students will just memorize that, but don't really understand where it comes from. The next angle that we're going to look at is 60 degrees. If you look at the two triangles that we placed together, I'm going to pull that down here. So let's look at these two triangles that we've placed together. You can see that the side opposite 30 degrees is 1/2, and the side opposite 60 degrees is the value that we just found, root 3 over 2. So the side opposite 60 degrees in our picture down here is equal to y, and that value is root 3 over 2. And the side opposite 30 degrees, so this angle in here is 30 degrees, and that value is 1/2. So that gives us the coordinate point for an angle that is 60 degrees. The last angle we're going to look at is 45 degrees. The Pythagorean theorem tells us that x squared plus y squared is equal to 1, and that's also the equation for the unit circle. X is going to equal y because the angles opposite each of these sides are both equal to 45 degrees. So we can just pencil in here. This angle is 45 degrees. So x and y are equal. So let's let y is equal to x, and then we can find x. So we have x squared plus x squared is 1. So 2x squared is 1. X squared is 1/2. And that tells us that x is 1 over the square root of 2. So let's go ahead and let's put our coordinate point up here on our picture. So x is 1 over root 2, and y is equal to x, so it's also 1 over root 2. We're now going to put all of this together and write down on our unit circle all the angles and points that should be memorized. In the next video on this playlist, I'll show you a simple and fast way to memorize all these values. So don't worry about that right now. Let's just understand what values do need to be memorized. See if we can fit it all in. Okay, it fits. So we're going to begin by noting that our first quadrant, our points are both positive. In our second quadrant, our x value is negative, our y value is positive. Our third quadrant, our x value is negative and our y value is negative. And in our fourth quadrant, the x value is positive and the y value is negative. The first thing we're going to do is write down the degrees that need to be memorized. So we're going to begin with the inner circle. So this is 0 degrees, and then 30 degrees, then 45 degrees, 60 degrees, and then all the way up to 90 degrees. Then we're going to start with 90 degrees and add 30 degrees to get 120 degrees. And then 90 degrees plus 45 degrees is 135 degrees. And then 90 degrees plus 60 degrees is 150 degrees. And then we come down to 180 degrees. Now we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to start with 180 degrees. We're going to add 30 degrees, and we get 210 degrees. Then we'll add 45 degrees to 180 degrees, and we'll get 225 degrees. Then we'll add 60 degrees to 180 and get 240 degrees. And then down at the bottom, we have 270 degrees. We're almost done. Now we're going to add 30 degrees to 270 degrees. We get 300 degrees. We're going to add 45 degrees to 270, which gives us 315 degrees. And then we're going to add 60 degrees to 270 degrees, and we'll end up with 330 degrees. And then let's remind ourselves, if we continue, we get back to 0 degrees or 360 degrees. Okay, the next values are going to be the degrees in terms of radians. So this is going to be 0, pi over 6, pi over 4, pi over 3, and at the top, we have pi over 2. Now we're going to start with pi over 2 and add pi over 6, and we get 2 pi over 3. Pi over 2 plus pi over 4 is 3 pi over 4. Pi over 2 plus pi over 3 is 5 pi over 6, and then we end up down here at pi. We now have pi that we're going to start with. We're going to add pi over 6, so we get 7 pi over 6. We're going to add pi over 4 to pi, and we get 5 pi over 4. Then we're going to add pi over 3 to pi. We get 4 pi over 3, and at the bottom, we have 3 pi over 2. Almost done. We're going to start with 3 pi over 2 and add pi over 6, and we get 5 pi over 3. 3 pi over 2 plus pi over 4 gives us 7 pi over 4. And then 3 pi over 2 plus pi over 3 gives us 11 pi over 6. In the next video, I'll show you a little bit easier way to be able to memorize this. The last thing that we need to do now is to fill in the coordinate points. And those we just found in this video. So at pi over 6 or 30 degrees, our x value is root 3 over 2. Our y value is a half. And then we have root 2 over 2, root 2 over 2. I think before we had written that as 1 divided by root 2, but I think when you memorize it, it's easier to write it as root 2 over 2. For 60 degrees, we have 1/2 root 3 over 2. So those are the hard ones. Now, when we write the ones in the other coordinates, we just have to remember that just the sign changes. Okay, so we come directly across. So this next point, our x value is going to change. So we have a -1/2 root 3 over 2. See, the y value stays the same. And then we have a minus root 2 over 2, root 2 over 2. The reason that the y value is staying the same is we're just going right across, so the y value is not changing. But the x value is flipping from positive to negative. So this next point is minus root 3 over 2, 1/2. And then we get down to -1, 0. So in the third quadrant, all the values are negative. In quadrant 3, our x value is going to be the same as it was in quadrant 2, but our y value is going to be negative. So this, at 7 pi over 6 or 210 degrees, we get minus root 3 over 2 minus 1/2. The next point is minus root 2 over 2 minus root 2 over 2. And then at 4 pi over 3, we have minus 1/2 minus root 3 over 2. Then we get down to the bottom, 0, -1, and then we're almost done. So hang with me. So in quadrant 4, the values are the same as in quadrant 1, but the y value is now negative. So this value is 1/2 minus root 3 over 2. The next value is root 2 over 2 minus root 2 over 2. And then our last one, yay, is root 3 over 2 minus 1/2. I would encourage you to look at the next video so that you can see the really easy way to memorize all these values.
If this video has been helpful to you, please consider subscribing to my channel. Keep believing in yourself and have a great rest of your day.